In June of 2026, a film arrived in cinemas around the world, directed by Steven Spielberg, the same director who nearly 50 years ago first showed us the possibility that we are not alone in the universe. He called it Disclosure Day, and it tells the story of a man who steals secret files from the government, files that prove something millions of people have suspected for decades, that extraterrestrials exist, that they have already been here, and that the government has known about it for a very long time. It is a science fiction film, or at least that is what we are told, because what very few people know is that almost everything that appears in that film is based on real events, documented testimonies, congressional hearings in the United States, statements from former presidents, and declassified files that the American government itself has been forced to admit exist. And in the very same month that film arrived in cinemas, a doctor and ufologist named Steven Greer sent a letter directly to the President of the United States, giving him an ultimatum: breathe deeply, relax, and come with me to one of the most urgent mysteries of our time. Close your eyes. Imagine you are a scientist working for the American government. You have spent years studying something you cannot tell anyone about, something that would forever change the way humanity understands itself. You have access to classified files, to photographs, to videos, to biological samples that do not correspond to any known species on Earth. And every day, when you finish your work, you sign a confidentiality document, promising that you will never reveal what you have seen. But there is something eating away at you from the inside, the question of whether humanity has the right to know the truth. That is exactly what happens to the main character of Disclosure Day. And according to testimonies from real people who have worked for the American government, it is also what has happened to them. Tonight, we will explore together the fascinating intersection between Spielberg's fiction and the real events that inspired it. Because in 2026, the question of whether we are alone in the universe has stopped being just a philosophical question. It has become a political question, a legal question, and a profoundly urgent one, calmly, in detail, without rush. Disclosure Day arrived in cinemas in June of 2026. The film tells the story of Daniel Kellner, a cybersecurity specialist who works for a secret corporation called Wardex, a branch of the American government whose official existence appears in no public record. Kellner discovers that Wardex possesses technology of non-human origin and files that document decades of contact between the American government and beings from another world. From Roswell in 1947 to much more recent events. The film grossed more than $238 million worldwide in its first weeks. But the most fascinating thing was not its box office success. It was what happened outside the cinemas. Because in the exact same month the film arrived in cinemas, on June 29th of 2026, a man named Steven Greer sent a letter to President Donald Trump. Who is Steven Greer? He is a retired emergency physician, researcher, prolific author, and accomplished documentary filmmaker. His life took him from the high-stakes world of emergency medicine to the forefront of research into extraterrestrial intelligence, where he is considered a pioneer in the field. And what he did on June 29th was extraordinary. In a formal letter sent directly to President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, and more than 24 other top American officials, the director of the Disclosure Project issued a clear 60-day ultimatum. It warned that unless the United States government formally contradicted his assessment in writing before August 29th of 2026, the Disclosure Project would proceed with the public release of what he describes as dispositive evidence and proof regarding UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence, and related covert programs. And the claims Greer made in that letter are extraordinarily specific and disturbing. He states that contacts under non-official cover possess evidence of extraterrestrial biologics, bodies, downed craft, illegal electromagnetic pulse weapons, and man-made UFOs deployed in criminal operations. He also claims decades of subversion of the legal constitutional government by agencies and corporations, involving large-scale embezzlement, treason, murders, kidnappings, and human trafficking. These are extraordinarily serious allegations, and they come from a man with decades of documented research. His team has compiled more than 30 years of research into the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, which includes testimonies from 755 military personnel, government officials, and corporate insiders. The deadline falls on August 29th of 2026. In just a few weeks, we will find out whether the government responds or whether Greer follows through on his threat to release everything. To understand why Greer's letter carries so much weight, we need to talk about something that happened in July of 2023. Something that passed relatively unnoticed by the general public, but that in the circles researching unidentified aerial phenomena was considered the most important moment in decades. The United States Congress convened a public hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena, and one of the witnesses who testified was a former intelligence officer named David Grusch. What he said shook the foundations of everything we thought we knew. Grusch testified under oath and with legal whistleblower protection that the United States government is in possession of craft of non-human origin. He did not say he had spotted UFOs in the sky. He said the government has the craft, physically, in secret facilities, studying them. And he went further. He said the government is also in possession of biological remains of the occupants of those craft, beings that are not human, that are not from this planet, and that have been studied in secret for decades. His credentials were impeccable. He was a decorated veteran of the United States Air Force. He had worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was not an anonymous conspiracy theorist on the internet. He was exactly the kind of person who should know what he is talking about, and he testified under oath, fully aware of the legal consequences of lying before Congress. Did he lie? It is possible. Did he tell the truth? If he did, the implications are so extraordinary that the human mind has difficulty processing them completely. In September of 2023, something happened that generated headlines around the world. Mexican ufologist Jaime Maussan presented before the Mexican Congress what he called non-human beings with more than 1,000 years of antiquity that he claimed had been found in Nazca, Peru. This was the first public hearing in the context of possible legislation on unidentified anomalous aerial phenomena in Mexico. The bodies were small, with 3 fingers on each hand, with body proportions different from any known human species. The scientific reaction was immediate and devastating. Peruvian forensic experts said they are not extraterrestrials. They stated that the objects were made with paper, glue, metal, and human and animal bones. A report from the Peruvian prosecutor's office determined that the supposed alien bodies were in reality recently manufactured dolls, covered with a mixture of paper and synthetic glue to simulate the presence of skin. It seemed like the end of the story, but it was not, because regardless of whether Musan's bodies were fake, the debate they generated was completely real, and it placed on the table a question that millions of people began asking themselves. If someone is willing to fabricate evidence of extraterrestrials, is it because they know the real evidence exists and want to get ahead of revealing it? Or because they simply want to exploit popular fascination with the subject for their own benefit? The answer to that question completely determines how you interpret everything else. But there is something more that the Mexican bodies revealed to us. They revealed that humanity is hungry for answers. That millions of people around the world are willing to believe because they feel deeply that something has been hidden from them, and that hunger, that collective feeling that the truth is being suppressed, is perhaps the most powerful evidence of all. Not that extraterrestrials exist, but that something is happening, something that the governments of the world are not telling completely. Let us do an exercise in imagination. Imagine that tomorrow, the United States government officially confirms what Grusch and Greer claim, that there are extraterrestrial craft, that there are bodies, that contact has been occurring in secret for decades. What would happen? The consequences would be so massive, so absolutely transformative, that it is almost impossible to process them completely. Let us start with religion. The 3 largest religions in the world, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, share a vision of the universe where human beings are the special creation of God, the center of sacred history, the recipients of divine revelation. How does that vision reconcile with the confirmed existence of other forms of intelligent life? Some theologians have argued that the existence of extraterrestrial life does not necessarily contradict the existence of God, that a larger universe simply implies a larger God. But others point out that religions as we know them, with their specific sacred texts, with their history of concrete revelations in concrete places on earth, could hardly survive intact the confirmation that we are not the only intelligent beings in the universe. The crisis of faith that would follow that revelation could be the greatest in human history. Then there is the economy, extraterrestrial technology, if it exists as Grusch and Greer claim, would be infinitely more advanced than anything humanity has ever developed. Propulsion systems that violate the known laws of physics, energy sources that would make oil, natural gas, and nuclear energy obsolete. The release of that technology would completely transform the global economy. The energy industries that move trillions of dollars would disappear overnight. The countries whose political power depends on their oil reserves would lose their influence overnight. The defense corporations that build their power on military technological superiority would find themselves obsolete, and the financial markets which are deeply dependent on stability and predictability, would collapse into chaos. That is exactly why some analysts believe the secret is maintained, not to protect humanity from a psychological shock, but to protect the economic and political interests of those who benefit from the current world order. And then there is society. The confirmation of extraterrestrial life would change something deeper than religion or economics. It would change the way humanity understands itself. Throughout all of our history, we have defined what we are in contrast to what we are not, with animals, with nature, with God. But we have never had to define ourselves in contrast to another form of intelligent life. What does it mean to be human when we are not the only ones? What does it mean to be the most advanced civilization when we clearly are not? Those questions have no easy answers, and humanity would have to find them while simultaneously trying to process the greatest revelation in its history. And now, we arrive at the most disturbing theory of all, a theory that Steven Greer has been warning about for years, and that in the context of everything we have explored tonight, becomes extraordinarily unsettling. Greer explains that a secret and illegal shadow government is operating clandestinely, using alien technology for often nefarious purposes, and represents a direct threat to national security. But there is something more that Greer warns about, that the revelation of extraterrestrials would not simply be a revelation. It would be an operation, a carefully designed operation, to create the greatest fear humanity has ever known. The theory works like this. Imagine that the most powerful organizations in the world, military corporations, intelligence agencies, financial groups, need a reason to unify humanity under a single global government. To achieve that, they need a single global threat, and there is nothing more threatening than an extraterrestrial invasion. According to this theory, the gradual disclosure we are living through, the congressional testimonies, the Pentagon videos, Greer's letter, are not the process of the truth finally coming to light. They are the steps of a carefully orchestrated narrative. A narrative that would culminate in the revelation that extraterrestrials not only exist, but are a threat that requires a global military response. A response that would justify unprecedented emergency powers, the suspension of civil rights, the total militarization of society, and perhaps the beginning of what would appear to be a war against an extraterrestrial threat, but that in reality would be something completely different. A war designed not to protect humanity from extraterrestrials, but to control humanity using the fear of extraterrestrials. Is this possible? Can modern military technology create a convincing illusion of an extraterrestrial threat? According to Greer and other researchers, the answer is yes. The craft that governments have developed using reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technology are virtually indistinguishable from craft of non-human origin. And if they were launched over the cities of the world, who could know with certainty whether they were real extraterrestrials or secret human technology disguised as a cosmic threat? That uncertainty is perhaps the most terrifying thing of everything we have explored tonight, because it means that the line between protection and control, between revelation and manipulation, between the truth and the perfect lie, is thinner than any of us would like to believe. And so, as the deadline of Steven Greer's ultimatum approaches, and as humanity continues searching for answers to the greatest questions it has ever asked, you can rest tonight. Let your mind relax. Let your thoughts disperse like stars in the infinite sky. We live in an extraordinary moment in history, a moment when the oldest question humanity has ever asked, are we alone, is closer to having an answer than at any other moment in history. But perhaps the most important question is not whether extraterrestrials exist. Perhaps the most important question is, who controls the narrative of their revelation, and why? Tonight, let that thought accompany you as you sleep. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and dream of the stars and everything they might be hiding. Good night.